In the Dark Age, long before Marvel and the heroic star you know as Captain America, this legend existed in real time. He was the unlikely soldier who stepped up when his people were desperate for a leader. This is the truth behind the shield. The story of Elias of Rivengarth isn't just a legend. It's the original blueprint for the Captain America story, featuring parallels so striking you'll question fiction. Long ago, when the world was shrouded in what people called the Dark Age, there was a small, quiet kingdom named Rivengarth. This kingdom was special because it had a secret, an ancient alarm, a set of giant carved horns that were supposed to blast a warning across the hills if danger ever came. But on one fateful night, that alarm failed. The night was soft and calm, with the guards of Rivengarth nearly asleep under the moon. Suddenly, the silence didn't just break, it was shattered by the thunder of war drums. The savage warriors of the kingdom of Salnitsa poured in like a dark, sudden flood. Blades flashed, torches blazed, and they caught Rivengarth completely unaware. The massive iron gates shook under the force of iron rams. Arrows rained down in the dark. Soldiers stumbled out of bed, scrambling to grab their weapons as the streets erupted in absolute chaos. Everywhere, women were screaming, little children were crying and trying to run, and the terrifying clang of steel against steel echoed across the kingdom. Salnitsa moved with brutal speed, and the fate of Rivengarth hung by a desperate thread.
Before the war, in that small, doomed kingdom, lived a boy named Elias. From his earliest days, Elias had a dream bigger than his small body. He wanted to be the strongest soldier in Rivengarth, a hero of his era. The problem was, he was weak, a fragile boy with thin arms. Elias was constantly bullied by the other village boys. They were bigger and meaner, and they never missed a chance to push him down. But there was one amazing thing about Elias, one quality that shone brighter than any strength: he was courageous. He was good at taking a beating, and he simply would not give up, no matter how huge his opponent was. He was never afraid to stand his ground. Because of his stubborn bravery, his body was often covered in bruises and wound marks. His only true strength was the voice of his father, who was always his backbone and constantly told him to be a man. When Elias became an adult, his childhood dream didn't fade. He went straight to the barracks to join the army. He was instantly mocked by the trained soldiers. They saw his small frame and laughed. But Elias had a dream, and he was nothing if not persistent. He kept coming back day after day, trying to prove himself. He collected several beatings and suffered countless humiliations in the process, but he never backed down. Finally, the captain of a small unit had seen enough. He took Elias in, not because of his physical body, but because of his persistence, his unwavering courage, and his mindset. Under the captain's wing, everything began to change. Elias was put through difficult training. He pushed himself harder than anyone else. With time, he became better, more skillful, and stronger than he had been before. Soon, the men who used to mock him were challenged in duels, and Elias was winning most of the time.
Now, on the night Salnitsa attacked, Elias was one of the soldiers rushing to the collapsing defenses. The battle raged for hours, a brutal storm of fire and steel. Rivengarth's soldiers fought bravely, but the Salnitsa attack was too heavy, and their forces began to breach the defenses. Many of Rivengarth's men were tired and losing hope, but Elias was getting more energized. He fought with incredible bravery and smartness. He wasn't the strongest, but he took down many foes and saw this chaos as his chance to finally prove himself. The captain watched Elias, impressed by his stamina and fire. The people of the kingdom were divided into sections, and each unit was responsible for protecting a particular group. When the Salnitsa army finally shattered their main defense, the captain gave Elias an urgent, vital order. He told Elias and two other soldiers to take the women and children and run to safety, to seek refuge in their alliance kingdom. Elias led the small group, escaping the carnage and running through the dark, dense forest. The old women and the children were slow, their movements filled with the agony of fear and exhaustion. At first, they didn't think they were being followed, but Elias was an anxious soldier now. He stopped, curious, and told the group to pause so he could be sure. That was when he saw them, the Salnitsa soldiers, closing up fast on horseback. They would be easily caught. Elias knew he couldn't hide, and he couldn't outrun them with the villagers. He came up with a genius, desperate idea. He told the other two soldiers to take the women and children and hide in a nearby cave. This cave was perfectly hidden, covered with wooden branches and thick grass so that someone walking right past it wouldn't even know it was there. The two soldiers stayed to guard the group in case the plan went wrong. Elias then took his own blade and cut his leg, watching the blood drip onto the forest track, leaving a false trail. He then bolted in a completely different direction, running with all his might, successfully driving the enemy soldiers away from the vulnerable villagers. The Salnitsa riders followed the dark blood track for a very long time, thinking they were gaining on the main group. When they finally closed in, they were stunned to find only one wounded soldier. Confused, they assumed he was a foolish soldier trying to play a hero. Arrows and spears rained down on Elias. He dodged some, but his luck ran out. 2 arrows struck him, one in his leg and the other painfully deep in his back. He collapsed, rolling down a small, sloping hill towards the flowing river that marked the edge of the forest. On the way down, his head struck a rock, and he instantly passed out. He tumbled into the cold water, the current grabbing him and pulling him under. The Salnitsa soldiers didn't bother to check, believing the river had swallowed a dead man. Elias was completely unconscious. He was being swept away by the river when his eyes partially fluttered open. Through the blur, he saw a ghostly figure dragging his body out of the water and onto the river shore. He felt a chilling, deep cold, like a soul freshly separated from the body. As he strained to see the figure's face, he passed out again. He woke up in an entirely different realm. The ground was plain, covered in beautiful, mysterious flowers and grass that stretched to an endless horizon. In the very center of this eternal field stood a single tree with strange fruit. The air itself was divided. Half the field was bathed in constant golden sunlight, and the other half was cast in moonlight. A figure dressed in a ghostly, ancient hood stood facing the tree, tending to it. Elias approached, his heart pounding but his courage intact. He tried to get the person's attention, but the figure didn't answer. Elias, frozen in fear but still stubborn, reached out to touch the hood. The figure instantly vanished. In the silence, a chilling whisper spoke directly into his ear. Elias spun around. Nothing. He was alone with the strange tree. Then, the ghostly stranger reappeared, turning to face him, plucking a fruit. "What are you doing here?" the faceless being asked. "You are not supposed to be here. You are still a man." Elias, despite his terror, explained everything. He didn't know how he arrived, but he added, his voice strained with duty. "War brought me here. My people are doomed, and I am supposed to protect them." The ghostly stranger turned, and Elias saw that the hood concealed a faceless being in the shape of a man. The figure spoke in a grave tone. "You are not completely dead, but you still have 2 choices to make that will change the course of everything." Before Elias, the being presented 2 strange fruits from the tree. On the right, a healthy, glittering, golden fruit. This, the being said, would grant him peace and eternal rest. On the left, a dark, ugly fruit as dark as charcoal, covered in thorns. This was the key to unlocking his full human potential to the highest ability. It would give him power, enhance his strength, and grant him dominion over his enemies. But in return, he would become a dark vessel. Elias didn't hesitate. He reached out and took the ugly, thorny fruit, the key to saving his people. He ate it completely. As he finished, his eyes blurred, and when he opened them again, he was in a third, different realm, standing alone on a tiny, precarious cliff, surrounded by endless, swirling water. He nearly slipped, regaining his balance just in time. The ghostly, faceless figure appeared again, leaning close and whispering right into Elias's face. "Wake up, Elias." Then, the stranger pushed him off the cliff. Elias screamed, falling deep into the endless ocean below. He instantly rose from his unconscious body, which was lying on the river's shore. He gasped, feeling reborn, different, and infinitely stronger. The arrow wounds had mysteriously healed, and the old bruise marks from his bullied childhood were completely gone. He remembered everything. He didn't understand it, but he remembered the choice he made. Elias pushed himself up, bolting back toward the kingdom. He wasn't just running. His speed was superhuman, faster than any normal man. Elias returned to Rivengarth and found utter devastation. The kingdom was in ruin. Soldiers' bodies were scattered everywhere, lying beside the slain Solnitsa warriors. His brave captain, the man who had given him a chance, was among the fallen. A deep wave of sorrow and fury washed over Elias. The defense was broken. The once proud ruler of Rivengarth had been captured and dragged back to Solnitsa, now suffering humiliation and torture. Many of the remaining women and children were also captured. Some were eliminated, and those few surviving soldiers who had surrendered were taken as prisoners. The kingdom was silent, filled only with the cries and weeping of the families who had managed to return or flee. They had almost no one left, less than 1,000 scattered soldiers, beaten and broken. The surviving soldiers saw the ruin and felt only weakness. But when they looked at Elias, they saw something entirely different. There was no weakness in him, only burning energy and absolute conviction. He stood among the crying people and the defeated soldiers, his spirit towering over the despair. "We have suffered a great tragedy," he told them, his voice ringing with a strength they had never heard. "But our story is not over. We can still make them pay. We will rescue our people and our king." The soldiers, though afraid, had loved ones in captivity. Seeing Elias's sheer certainty and his newfound power gave them a desperate hope. They asked the obvious question, "How? We are less than 1,000. They are an empire." Elias just smiled. To him, their small number wasn't a weakness. It was an advantage for a genius plan. Under the cloak of night, Elias and his small but motivated band of soldiers set sail toward the Solnitsa kingdom. Their numbers were small, but their strategy was brilliant. Close to Solnitsa, Elias executed his first stroke of genius. He ordered the majority of his small force, all but about 100 men, to dig a massive, carefully hidden death trap, a very large, deep hole designed to trap thousands of rushing soldiers. The surface of the deep hole was carefully covered with light dust sand in a way the enemy soldiers won't notice. The rest of the Rivengarth army hid nearby, waiting for the perfect moment. Meanwhile, a small group of less than 100 Rivengarth soldiers, disguised as Solnitsa citizens, snuck into the enemy kingdom. Elias, however, did not sneak. He was the distraction. Elias, armed with his superhuman speed and strength, stood alone on an empty plain outside the city walls. In the middle of the night, he launched his attack. He was immediately spotted, and a massive force of Solnitsa soldiers rushed out to stop the lone intruder. They attacked him with an insane force, swords, spears, and arrows. But the Solnitsa soldiers had never seen anything like it. Elias was 10 times faster than all of them. Before an enemy could complete a single move, Elias had made 10. His body was a blurring force of movement, dodging every strike. His fists, feet, and whatever weapon he held acted as a shield and a spear at the same time. He was a hurricane of a man. He could jump high above the fortress walls like a wild beast. He would weave through a torrent of arrows as if their movement was slow in his eyes. The Solnitsa army doubted he was even a man. This was Elias's entire plan, to draw out every single enemy soldier. Seeing one man slaying so many of their comrades, thousands of enemy soldiers poured out of the gates, a massive tide of fury. They were furious that one man had humiliated their forces and vowed not to let him escape. Elias lured them on, running through the streets and drawing more attention, creating absolute chaos in the Solnitsa kingdom. He kept running until he saw that the cell where the prisoners were held was left with almost no guards. This was the signal. The few disguised Rivengarth soldiers seized the opportunity. They freed their captured people and, most importantly, their ruler. As the king and the freed prisoners snuck out, they saw the devastation Elias had caused, and the king was instantly pleased by his impossible bravery. The spirit of the freed people soared. Some of the liberated soldiers instantly chose to join the fight with Elias, while the others safely guided their king and the rest of the people back to Rivengarth. Elias, with the thousands of enraged Solnitsa soldiers screaming and pursuing him, led them straight to the forest. He ran with superhuman speed, pulling them behind him like a wave. Finally, he reached the preset location and, with one last burst of speed, leapt across the hidden chasm. The Solnitsa army took the bait. Thinking they had him cornered, thousands of soldiers plunged straight into the deep, massive death trap. Screams and the clatter of armor echoed as they realized their mistake. The concealed Rivengarth soldiers then emerged, ready to eliminate the helpless enemy forces trapped below. Solnitsa was crushed, not by a large army, but by the strategic power and incredible smartness of a single man. When Elias returned to Rivengarth, he was met with cheers, not tears. The ruler, safe and free, was overwhelmed by Elias's bravery and genius. The king granted Elias the highest honor and immediately made him the captain of the entire kingdom's army. Elias's lifelong dream had come true. He was no longer the frail boy who took beatings. He was the kingdom's protector, its champion, and a legendary soldier. He was the fragile boy constantly bullied, but he possessed an unwavering will and courage. His moral character, like Steve Rogers's, was his original superpower. After a near-death sacrifice, he consumed the thorny, dark fruit, a mystical serum that unlocked his full human potential. He was instantly gifted with superhuman speed, strength, and stamina, a true ancient super soldier. He returned to a defeated army and, instead of relying on numbers, he used genius strategy. He masterminded an intricate plot, drawing the entire enemy army into a massive death trap, while a handful of men liberated the king. Elias fought a war not just with strength, but with courage and a mind for the win. He went from the kingdom's weakest man to its ultimate protector and was instantly given the highest military honor, captain of the entire army. His legend proves that the spirit of Captain America, the idea that the smallest man can become the greatest hero through pure heart, is an ancient truth woven into human history.